I never thought I'd be standing at the altar of St. Catherine's Chapel on what should have been the happiest day of my life, watching my sister Miranda destroy everything with a single announcement, until I reached into my bouquet and pressed play on the recording device I'd hidden there 3 months earlier. The morning had started like every bride dreams it would. October sunlight streamed through the windows of the bridal suite at the Grandview Manor, casting everything in that golden light photographers chase for hours. At 42, I'd waited longer than most for this moment. But David was worth the wait. After 2 tours in Afghanistan as an army medic and years of rebuilding my life afterward, I'd learned that good things come to those who've earned them through blood, sweat, and patience. I was adjusting my grandmother's pearl necklace when Miranda burst through the door without knocking, her strawberry blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She wore a flowing emerald dress that complemented her eyes, the same eyes we'd inherited from our mother, though Miranda had always wielded hers like weapons. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge that meant trouble was coming. I caught her reflection in the vanity mirror as I applied my lipstick. "It's my wedding day, Miranda. Whatever drama you're brewing can wait until after the honeymoon." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, this can't wait. Trust me." My maid of honor, Jessica, looked up from where she was steaming my veil. She'd known Miranda long enough to recognize the warning signs. "Maybe we should focus on getting Sarah ready. The ceremony starts in 2 hours." Miranda ignored her completely, perching on the edge of the antique settee like she owned the room. "I've been thinking about my toast tonight. You know, the one where I'm supposed to tell everyone how wonderful you are as a sister." I set down my lipstick and turned to face her fully. Miranda had been acting strange for weeks, ever since David, and I announced our engagement. She'd made snide comments about my dress being too young for someone my age, questioned whether David really wanted children with someone in their 40s, and generally managed to inject poison into every wedding-related conversation we'd had. "Miranda, I know you're not thrilled about the wedding, but can we please just get through today without any of your passive-aggressive commentary?" Her smile was sharp as broken glass. "Passive-aggressive? Sarah, you know me better than that. When I have something to say, I say it directly." Jessica stepped between us, holding my veil like a shield. "Ladies, maybe we should—" "Did you know?" Miranda continued, her voice taking on that sweet, venomous tone she'd perfected in high school. "That David came to see me last week?" My blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "He's having second thoughts, Sarah. About the wedding. About everything. He told me he's been feeling trapped, like he's settling for someone safe instead of someone he's actually passionate about." The words hit me like shrapnel. I'd served in combat zones, seen things that would break most people, but nothing had prepared me for the surgical precision of my sister's cruelty. "You're lying." Miranda examined her manicured nails with theatrical indifference. "He said he's always been attracted to younger women. Women who still have their whole lives ahead of them. Women who can give him the family he really wants." Stop. The word came out harder than I intended, carrying the authority I'd learned commanding medical units under fire. "Stop right now." But Miranda was just getting started. She stood up, smoothing her dress with the satisfied air of someone delivering a killing blow. "He asked me if I thought he was making a mistake. Can you imagine? Your fiancé asking your own sister if he should run." Jessica's face had gone pale. She'd known David for 2 years, had seen how he looked at me, how he'd waited patiently through my PTSD episodes and nightmares. "Miranda, that's enough. You're being cruel for no reason." "Cruel?" Miranda's laugh was like breaking crystal. "I'm being honest. Someone has to be. Sarah's living in a fantasy if she thinks a man like David is going to be satisfied with damaged goods." The words, damaged goods, hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the one that came with memories of convoy attacks and field hospitals. But this pain was different. This was personal in a way that war had never been. I stood slowly, my hands steady despite the trembling I felt inside. Get out. Excuse me? Get out of my bridal suite. Get out of my wedding. Get out of my life. Miranda's expression shifted, surprise flickering across her features. She'd expected tears, breakdown, maybe even me calling off the wedding. What she hadn't expected was the steel that 2 tours of duty had forged in my spine. Sarah, don't be dramatic. I'm just looking out for you. Someone has to protect you from making the biggest mistake of your life. The biggest mistake of my life, I said, each word measured and precise, was ever trusting you with anything that mattered to me. I walked to the door and held it open. Leave. Now. For a moment, Miranda just stared at me. Then her mask slipped back into place, and she shrugged as if none of this mattered to her at all. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when he leaves you at the altar. She sauntered toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Sarah? You might want to talk to Mom and Dad before the ceremony. I told them about David's visit too. They're concerned. After she left, I sank into the chair by the window, my wedding dress pooling around me like spilled cream. Jessica knelt beside me, her hand gentle on my shoulder. She's lying, Jessica said firmly. David adores you. Anyone with eyes can see that. I nodded, but Miranda's words had found their target. She'd always known exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. When we were kids, she'd tell me my drawings were ugly right before the school art show. In high school, she'd point out my flaws before every date. As adults, she'd somehow managed to insert herself into every important moment of my life, always finding a way to make it about her or to diminish my happiness. Why does she do this? I whispered, more to myself than to Jessica. Because she's jealous, Jessica said without hesitation. She's always been jealous of you, Sarah. You're stronger than she'll ever be, and she knows it. I looked out the window at the chapel, where David was probably getting ready with his groomsmen. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Can't wait to marry you, beautiful. See you at the altar. The relief that flooded through me was immediate and overwhelming. Whatever game Miranda was playing, David wasn't part of it. But I knew my sister well enough to know that her visit this morning was just the opening move. Miranda never struck once when she could strike repeatedly, and she'd just declared war on the most important day of my life. I picked up my phone and scrolled to David's number, then hesitated. If I told him what Miranda had said, it would cast a shadow over our entire wedding day. If I didn't, I'd spend the ceremony waiting for her next attack. Instead, I opened my recording app and pressed record. Just in case, I murmured to Jessica, who was watching me with confusion. In case of what? In case my sister isn't done trying to destroy my wedding day. I slipped the phone into the hidden pocket of my bouquet, the one the florist had sewn in to hold emergency lipstick and tissues. The recording app would capture everything for the next 4 hours, more than enough to document whatever Miranda had planned next. Because if there was one thing my military training had taught me, it was the importance of intelligence gathering. And if there was one thing growing up with Miranda had taught me, it was that she always had more ammunition in reserve. The question wasn't whether she'd use it. The question was when and how public she'd make the detonation. An hour before the ceremony, Miranda returned with reinforcements. She swept back into the bridal suite flanked by our mother, Carol, and our Aunt Linda, both wearing expressions of carefully manufactured concern. Behind them trailed Miranda's teenage daughter, Zoe, looking uncomfortable in her junior bridesmaid dress. "Sarah, honey," our mother began, her voice dripping with the same false sweetness she'd used when delivering bad news throughout my childhood, "we need to have a family discussion." I was having my makeup touched up by the artist when they arrived, so I couldn't immediately escape. The woman working on my eyes paused, clearly sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the room like smoke. "Actually, Mrs. Chen, Jessica said quickly. Maybe you could take a break? Get some coffee? The makeup artist didn't need to be told twice. She gathered her brushes and disappeared, leaving me trapped in the chair facing the mirror while my family arranged themselves behind me like a tribunal. Miranda told us about her conversation with David, Aunt Linda said, settling her considerable bulk into the settee. Linda had always been Miranda's biggest enabler, the one who'd excuse every cruel thing she did as just being honest or trying. To help? In the mirror, I watched Miranda position herself where she could see my reaction. She'd changed tactics since this morning, trading her confrontational approach for something more insidious. Now she was the concerned sister, worried about my well-being, reluctantly sharing devastating information for my own good. I didn't want to tell them, Miranda said, her voice heavy with false regret. But when David came to me so conflicted, so torn up about his feelings, I realized I couldn't keep it to myself. Not when my sister's happiness is at stake. My mother moved closer, placing her hands on my shoulders in what looked like comfort but felt like a trap. Sweetheart, we just want you to be sure you're making the right decision. You've been through so much with the military and everything afterward. Maybe you're rushing into this because you feel like time is running out. The words stung because they contained just enough truth to make them effective. I had wondered, in my darker moments, if David was with me out of pity for what I'd endured. Overseas. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the way I sometimes flinched at unexpected sounds. It wasn't exactly the fairy tale romance most men dreamed of. Time isn't running out, I said carefully, meeting my mother's eyes in the mirror. I'm 42, not 92. And David and I have talked extensively about what we both want from this marriage. Miranda moved to perch on the arm of the chair, next to mine, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. But have you talked about children? Really talked about it? Because David specifically mentioned wanting a family, and at your age— She let the sentence hang, unfinished, but devastating in its implications. Zoe shifted uncomfortably by the door. Mom, maybe we shouldn't— Zoe, adults are talking, Miranda cut her off sharply, then turning back to me with renewed focus. I'm just saying, David is 36. He's got years ahead of him to start fresh with someone who can give him everything he wants. The attack was surgical in its precision. Miranda knew that children were a complicated topic for David and me. We'd discussed it, of course, but we'd also agreed that our relationship was complete with or without kids. I'd seen too much death and suffering to believe that procreation was the ultimate measure of a woman's worth. But sitting here in my wedding dress, surrounded by family members nodding in agreement with Miranda's poison, I felt every one of my 42 years. What exactly did David say to you? I asked, proud that my voice remained steady. Miranda's eyes lit up with the satisfaction of a predator closing in on wounded prey. He said he'd been having dreams about having children, about coaching Little League and teaching kids to ride bikes. He asked if I thought it was fair to deny himself that future. And what did you tell him? The question came out harder than I intended, carrying the edge I'd developed during interrogations of suspected insurgents. I told him the truth, that you're set in your ways, that you've made it clear kids aren't a priority, and that if he wants a traditional family, he should probably think seriously about whether this marriage is the right choice. The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of wedding guests arriving in the parking lot below. Through the window, I could see cars streaming into the chapel lot, friends and family gathering to celebrate what was supposed to be the beginning of my new life. Aunt Linda cleared her throat. Miranda also mentioned that David seemed distant lately, like he was going through the motions. I turned in my chair to face them directly, abandoning the mirror and its illusion of distance. Has anyone in this room actually spoken to David? Or are we all just taking Miranda's word for his alleged doubts? My mother's hand tightened on my shoulder. Sarah, we're not attacking you. We're trying to protect you from getting hurt. If David is having second thoughts, then he would tell me himself, I interrupted. We're both adults. We've both been married before. We know how to communicate. Miranda leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that looked almost sympathetic. But what if he doesn't want to hurt you? What if he's trying to spare your feelings right up until he can't anymore? The question hit its mark because it echoed my own deepest fears. David was kind, sometimes to a fault. Would he go through with a wedding he was uncertain about rather than devastate me days before the ceremony? He loves me, I said. But even, to my own ears, it sounded more like a prayer than a statement. Of course he does, Miranda agreed quickly. But love isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes love means letting someone go so they can find what they really need. Zoe made a small sound of distress from by the door. Mom, please stop. Miranda whirled on her daughter. Zoe, this doesn't concern you. Why don't you go check on the flowers or something? Because someone needs to tell Aunt Sarah the truth, Zoe said, her young voice shaking with anger. This is all… Zoe! Miranda's voice cracked like a whip. Out! Now! The teenager looked at me with something that might have been an apology, then fled the room. Her exit left behind a silence thick with unspoken tensions. My mother smoothed my veil, unnecessarily the gesture meant to be comforting, but somehow making everything worse. Honey, we just want you to go into this with your eyes open. If there's even a chance that David is having doubts, there isn't, I said firmly, standing up from the chair and forcing them all to step back. And even if there were, it would be between David and me to work out. Not David and Miranda. Miranda's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. I'm trying to help you, Sarah. I'm trying to save you from making a fool of yourself in front of 200 people. No, I said, walking to the window and looking down at the chapel where my future husband was probably adjusting his tie and making last-minute jokes with his groomsmen. You're trying to sabotage my wedding because you can't stand to see me happy. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a grenade. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Miranda laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. That's ridiculous. Why would I care whether you're happy or not? Because you've never been able to stand it when I succeed at something you can't control. When I enlisted, you told everyone I was running away from my problems. When I came back with commendations, you said the military just lowered their standards. When I started my nursing practice, you suggested I was only successful because people felt sorry for me. Each word landed like a precision strike, and I could see Miranda's composure beginning to crack. That's not, I never said. You did. All of it. And now, on my wedding day, you're doing it again. But this time, I'm not going to let you succeed. I moved to the door and opened it wide. Get out, all of you. This is my wedding day and I'm done letting you poison it. My mother looked stricken. Sarah, we're just trying to… I know what you're trying to do, and I'm telling you to leave. Now. Aunt Linda huffed and gathered her purse. Well, I never. Such disrespect. Miranda was the last to move, studying me with narrowed eyes. You're making a mistake, Sarah. When this all falls apart, and it will, don't come crying to me. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied, holding the door open until they all filed out. When they were gone, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The recording device in my bouquet had captured every word, every insinuation, every carefully crafted lie Miranda had woven. But more importantly, it had captured something else. The sound of my own voice, growing stronger and more certain with each response. Whatever game Miranda was playing, I was ready for the next round. 20 minutes before the ceremony, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and for a split second, Miranda's poison worked its way into my thoughts. Was this the call? The one where he'd tell me he couldn't go through with it? Hey, beautiful. His voice was warm, completely normal. I know we're not supposed to talk before the ceremony, but I couldn't wait any longer to hear your voice. The relief nearly buckled my knees. I'm so glad you called. Everything okay? You sound a little stressed. I almost told him everything right then. Miranda's visit, the lies about his supposed doubts, the family intervention. But through the window, I could see guests taking their seats in the chapel, David's elderly grandmother being helped to her place in the front row, my army buddies from my unit looking sharp in their dress uniforms. Just wedding nerves, I said instead. Nothing that seeing you at the altar won't cure. Good, because I've been thinking about you all morning. About how lucky I am that you said yes to a beat-up old carpenter who was smart enough to recognize perfection when he saw it. David was a contractor, not a carpenter, and he wasn't beat up or old, but he had this way of downplaying himself that made me want to spend the rest of my life building him up the way he'd built me up over the past 3 years. I love you, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. I love you too. See you. In 20 minutes, Mrs. Morrison to be. After he hung up, I sat in the quiet bridal suite, adjusting my grandmother's pearl bracelet and thinking about how Miranda had chosen her battlefield. She'd attacked on the morning of my wedding, when I'd be emotional and vulnerable, when there'd be no time to fact-check her claims or have rational conversations with David. She'd brought reinforcements in the form of our mother and aunt, creating a united front that made her lies seem more credible. And she'd chosen the most devastating possible accusations, that David didn't really want me, that I was too old, too damaged, too set in my ways to make him truly happy. It was psychological warfare at its finest, designed to make me doubt everything I knew to be true about my relationship. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Sarah, it's me." Jessica's voice, cautious and gentle. I unlocked the door to find her standing there with my bouquet, her expression troubled. "How are you? Holding up after that ambush?" she asked, settling beside me on the small sofa. "I'm angry," I admitted. "Furious, actually. Miranda has done a lot of terrible things over the years, but this feels different, more calculated." Jessica nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about that too. The timing, the way she brought backup, even the specific things she chose to say. It all felt very strategic. She knows I can't call David right now and verify her story. She knows I can't have a heart-to-heart with him 20 minutes before we're supposed to walk down the aisle. She's counting on me either canceling the wedding or going through with it while completely rattled. So, what are you going to do? I fingered the hidden recording device in my bouquet. I'm going to marry the man I love, and then I'm going to wait and see what other tricks my sister has up her sleeve. Jessica looked confused. Other tricks? This wasn't the main event, Jess. This was just the opening salvo. Miranda didn't come here to stop the wedding. She came here to set the stage for something bigger, something public. What makes you think that? I stood and moved to the mirror, checking my lipstick one final time. Because I know my sister. She doesn't want to stop my wedding privately. She wants to destroy it spectacularly in front of everyone we know. She wants to humiliate me so thoroughly that the story gets told at family gatherings for the next 20 years. The realization crystallized as I spoke it aloud. Miranda hadn't expected me to call off the wedding based on her morning visit. She'd expected me to be shaken, uncertain, vulnerable to whatever she had planned for the reception. The pre-ceremony attack was just meant to soften me up for the real assault. Jesus, Sarah, what do you think she's planning? I don't know yet, but whatever it is, I'll be ready for it. A knock at the door interrupted us. "Ms. Morrison, it's time," called the wedding coordinator. I picked up my bouquet, feeling the weight of the recording device hidden among the white roses and baby's breath. Let's get me married. The walk to the chapel felt surreal. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the faint sound of organ music drifting from inside. My father waited by the chapel doors in his dress uniform, the same one he'd worn to my military commissioning ceremony 15 years earlier. At 65, He still carried himself like the Marine he'd once been, shoulders straight and jaw set. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, offering me his arm. "Ready to do this?" "More than ready, Dad." He studied my face with the sharp eyes that had served him well in 3 decades of military service. "Everything all right? Your mother seemed agitated when I saw her a few minutes ago." "Miranda stirred up some drama this morning. Nothing I can't handle." His expression darkened. "What kind of drama?" "The kind that's designed to cause maximum damage with minimum truth." "Don't worry about it, Dad. Focus on walking me down the aisle, without tripping." He squeezed my arm gently. "Roger that." The chapel doors opened, and the wedding march began. Through the doorway, I could see 200 faces turned toward us, smiling and expectant. David stood at the altar in his charcoal gray suit, his face lighting up when he saw me. His best man, Tony, grinned and gave me a subtle thumbs up. But as my father and I began our walk down the aisle, I couldn't help scanning the congregation for Miranda. I found her in the 3rd row, wearing that same emerald dress and a smile that looked perfect from a distance. She was holding a tissue and dabbing at her eyes as if overcome with emotion at her sister's beautiful wedding. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Beside her sat our mother, Aunt Linda, and Zoe, who looked miserable despite the festive occasion. My cousin Rebecca and her family filled out the rest of the row. All of them turned toward me with expressions of joy and celebration. But I knew Miranda too well to trust the surface. Somewhere in that angelic facade was a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. David's eyes never left mine as I approached the altar. Whatever doubts Miranda had tried to plant about his commitment evaporated under the intensity of his gaze. This was a man in love, a man who'd waited 3 years for this moment, a man who'd helped me rebuild my life after the war had torn it apart. When my father placed my hand in David's, I felt the last of Miranda's poison leave my system. This was right. This was real. Whatever my sister had planned, it couldn't touch what David and I had built together. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Pastor Williams spoke about love that endures through trials, about partnerships forged in mutual respect and strengthened by shared challenges. David's vows made me cry, and mine made him tear up, much to the delight of our photographer. When Pastor Williams pronounced us husband and wife, David's kiss was gentle and reverent, as if he couldn't quite believe his luck. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers, and for a moment, everything was perfect. But as we turned to face our guests for the first time as a married couple, I caught Miranda's expression in the split second before she remembered to look happy. It was cold, calculating, and absolutely furious. The real war was about to begin. The receiving line after the ceremony gave me a chance to greet our guests individually, but it also gave Miranda an opportunity to position herself strategically. I watched her work the crowd with the skill of a seasoned politician, moving from group to group, touching arms, whispering in ears, planting seeds of whatever destruction she had planned. She hugged me when her turn came in the receiving line. Her embrace just a little too tight, her smile just a little too bright. "Congratulations, sister," she murmured in my ear. "I hope you enjoy every moment of today, because some moments are all we get." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. I pulled back and met her eyes, letting her see that I wasn't intimidated. "Thank you, Miranda. I'm sure the reception will be unforgettable." Her smile sharpened. "Oh, it will be. I guarantee it." As the receiving line continued, David leaned over and whispered, "Was it my imagination, or was that exchange a little tense?" "Miranda." "Being Miranda," I said quietly. "Don't worry about it." But privately, I was calculating timing and logistics. The reception would last 4 hours. Dinner would be served at 7, followed by toasts at 8:30. If Miranda was planning something public and devastating, the toasts would be her, most likely target. A captive audience, an open microphone, and the perfect opportunity to deliver a kill shot disguised as a loving tribute. I checked my bouquet discreetly, making sure the recording device was still secure and functioning. Whatever Miranda had planned, I'd be ready for it. The question wasn't whether she'd attack during the reception. The question was how spectacular she'd try to make the explosion, and whether I could contain the damage when she lit the fuse. QE, reception hall at Grandview Manor buzzed with the warm energy of celebration. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over round tables draped in ivory linens, each centerpiece a cascade of white roses and eucalyptus that filled the air with subtle fragrance. David and I made our entrance to thunderous applause, his hand steady and reassuring in mine as we navigated toward the head table. What our guests didn't know, what even David didn't know, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 months. It had started in July, just 2 weeks after David proposed. Miranda had come to visit under the pretense of helping with wedding planning, armed with bridal magazines and an eagerness that should have set off alarm bells immediately. She'd insisted on staying in my guest room for a week, claiming she wanted to bond with me during this special time. I should have known better. Miranda only showed sudden interest in my life when she had an agenda. The first red flag came when I caught her going through my desk while I was in the shower. She'd claimed she was looking for wedding vendor business cards, but my desk was in my bedroom, nowhere near the kitchen where we'd been discussing catering options. The second red flag was her sudden fascination with David's schedule, asking detailed questions about his work projects, his friends, his habits. But the third red flag was what made me start recording our conversations. I'd come home early from a dress fitting to find Miranda on my back porch, talking on her phone in the low, conspiratorial tone she used when she was scheming. I'd slipped in through the front door and crept close enough to the kitchen window to overhear. "No, she has no idea," Miranda had been saying. "She's so desperate to get married that she's not thinking clearly. Trust me, David's having serious doubts, but he's too nice to break her heart before the wedding." There had been a pause then. "Of course I'm sure. I can tell these things. He's going through the motions because he feels sorry for her, but a man like that isn't going to be satisfied with damaged goods forever." The person on the other end had said something that made Miranda laugh. "Oh, I have plans. Big plans. By the time I'm done, everyone will know exactly what kind of mistake David's making, and Sarah will finally understand that some people aren't meant for fairy tale endings." I'd backed away from the window, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and something colder, more calculating. Miranda wasn't just expressing doubts about my relationship. She was actively plotting to destroy it. And she was involving other people in her scheme. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I'd installed a voice recording app on my phone and started documenting every conversation we had. By the time her visit ended, I had hours of audio revealing the true depth of her malice. Miranda hadn't just expressed doubts about David and me. She'd fabricated an entire narrative about his supposed dissatisfaction with our relationship. She'd claimed he'd confided in her about wanting children, about feeling trapped, about regretting the proposal. She'd even practiced different versions of these lies, refining them like an actress rehearsing a script. But the most damning recording had come on her last night at my house. She'd been on the phone again, this time with someone she called Honey, discussing the details of what she planned to announce at my wedding reception. "It's going to be perfect," she'd said, her voice bright with anticipation. "I'll wait until the toasts, when everyone's paying attention. I'll start with something sweet about Sarah, then drop the bomb. Completely devastating, but I'll make it look like I'm just being honest about a difficult situation." The person on the other end had asked what she meant, and Miranda's response had made my blood run cold. "I'm going to announce that I'm pregnant, that David and I had an affair, and that I'm carrying his baby." Can you imagine the look on Sarah's face? Can you imagine how humiliated she'll be in front of everyone she knows? There had been more laughter, then. The beauty of it is that by the time anyone figures out I'm lying, the damage will be done. Her marriage will be ruined, her reputation destroyed, and everyone will remember her wedding as the day her sister had to tell the truth about what her husband really wanted. I'd sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m, listening to this recording over and over, trying to process the sheer malevolence of what Miranda was planning. This wasn't just cruelty. It was psychological warfare designed to cause maximum damage with surgical precision. But Miranda had made one crucial mistake. She'd revealed her plan to someone who clearly had doubts about the scheme. I could hear the hesitation in the other person's voice, the way they kept asking if she was sure this was a good idea. And in her eagerness to convince them, Miranda had provided a full confession of her intent to fabricate an affair and fake pregnancy for the sole purpose of destroying my wedding. Now, 3 months later, I sat at the head table watching Miranda work the room during cocktail hour. She moved through the reception with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. She charmed David's elderly relatives, commiserated with my army friends about how proud they must be of me, and played the role of devoted sister, to perfection. But I could see the calculation behind her performance. She was positioning herself, building credibility with key audience members, ensuring that when she delivered her devastating announcement, people would be inclined to believe. David squeezed my hand under the table. "You're watching Miranda like she's a potential threat. What's going on?" I turned to study my new husband's face. David had kind eyes, the sort of deep brown that reminded me of rich coffee or dark chocolate. After 3 years together, I could read his moods in the set of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, the way his smile reached his eyes or stopped short of them. Right now, he looked concerned but not suspicious, worried about my stress level but not about Miranda's motives. "She's been acting strange lately," I said carefully. "I'm just trying to figure out what she's up to." "Strange how?" I considered, telling him everything. The recorded conversations, the planned fake pregnancy announcement, the elaborate scheme to destroy our marriage before it was even an hour old. But something held me back. Maybe it was the desire to handle this myself, to prove that I could protect what we'd built without needing rescue. Maybe it was the knowledge that hearing about Miranda's plans would ruin David's enjoyment of our reception, regardless of how fake they were. Or maybe it was something deeper. The understanding that Miranda's lies would be more completely exposed if I let her tell them publicly before revealing the truth. "She's been asking a lot of questions about you," I said instead. "About your work, your friends, your feelings about marriage and children. It feels intrusive." David frowned, glancing across the room to where Miranda was deep in conversation with his sister Kate. "That is weird. What kind of questions? Whether you're happy with me? Whether you have doubts about getting married? Whether you want kids more than you've let on? And what did you tell her? That those are conversations between you and me, not between you and her." David's frown deepened. "Sarah, I've never talked to Miranda about any of those things. I barely know her well enough to discuss the weather, let alone my feelings about our relationship." The confirmation of what I already knew sent a rush of vindication through me. "I didn't think you had. So why is she asking about them?" Before I could answer, the wedding coordinator approached our table with a clipboard and a bright smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, we're ready to serve dinner. After the main course, we'll move into toasts. I have Miranda down for the maid of honor speech first, followed by Tony's best man toast." My stomach clenched. "Actually, I'd like to change the order. Tony first, then Miranda." The coordinator looked puzzled. "Are you sure? Traditionally, the maid of honor speaks first." "I'm sure. Tony first." After she left, David studied my face with growing concern. "Okay, now I know something's wrong. What's going on with Miranda?" I reached into my bouquet and felt the solid weight of the recording device, still capturing every word spoken at our table. In less than an hour, Miranda would take the microphone and attempt to detonate the bomb she'd been building for 3 months. She'd stand before our friends and family and announce her fake pregnancy, claiming an affair with my husband that never happened. But what Miranda didn't know was that I had the recordings. All of them. Every conversation where she'd rehearsed her lies. Every phone call where she'd refined her strategy. Every moment where she'd revealed the true malicious intent behind her performance. "David," I said quietly, "I need you to trust me for the next hour. Can you do that?" His expression grew serious, the same look he wore when discussing a particularly challenging construction project. "Of course, but Sarah—" "No questions. Not yet. Just trust me. And when the time comes, let me handle whatever happens." He nodded slowly, though I could see the confusion and concern in his eyes. "Whatever you need." Across the room, Miranda caught my eye and raised her champagne glass in a toast, her smile sharp and anticipatory. She thought she was about to deliver the performance of her lifetime, the devastating revelation that would destroy my happiness and cement her reputation as the sister brave enough to tell the truth. But Miranda had forgotten the most important lesson from our military family. Always know what your enemy is planning before you engage, and I'd been gathering intelligence for 3 months. The story of how I learned to recognize Miranda's patterns began 15 years ago, when I was 27 and fresh out of my first deployment to Afghanistan. I'd come home decorated but damaged, carrying invisible wounds that made civilian life feel like walking through a minefield. Miranda had been 23 then, working at a boutique and living with our parents while she figured things out. I'd been staying in a small apartment near the VA hospital, attending therapy sessions and trying to readjust to a world where the sound of car doors slamming didn't send me diving for cover. The transition was brutal. Some days I felt like I was watching my life through bulletproof glass, present but not really participating. Miranda had seemed genuinely concerned about my struggles. She'd visit twice a week, bringing groceries and staying to cook dinner, listening patiently while I talked about nightmares and hypervigilance and the guilt that came with surviving when others hadn't. For the first time in our adult lives, I'd felt like we might actually become friends instead of just sisters by accident of birth. Then I'd started dating Marcus, a physical therapist who worked with veterans. He was patient with my PTSD symptoms, understanding about the bad days, and slowly helping me rebuild my confidence in social situations. For 6 months, our relationship had been the bright spot in an otherwise difficult year. Miranda had met Marcus at a family barbecue in late summer. She'd been charming and interested, asking about his work, complimenting his dedication to helping veterans, expressing admiration for his patience with my recovery process. I'd been proud to introduce them, happy that my sister approved of the first man who'd made me feel human again. 2 weeks later, Marcus had broken up with me. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he'd said, sitting in my tiny living room with his hands clasped between his knees. "I care about you, but I don't think I'm the right person for where you are right now." The rejection had been devastating, but not entirely. Surprising. I'd been expecting it, waiting for the moment when my damage became too much for him to handle. "Is it the nightmares? The anxiety attacks?" Marcus had looked genuinely confused. "What? No, that's not—" "Sarah, your sister talked to me." "Miranda? What does she have to do with this?" "She's worried about you. She thinks I'm holding you back from getting the help you really need." I'd felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What kind of help?" "Professional help. Inpatient treatment." "She said you've been having thoughts about hurting yourself, that you've been drinking heavily, that you're not taking your medications properly." Every word had been a lie. I'd been attending therapy religiously, taking my medications exactly as prescribed, and I hadn't touched alcohol since coming home because it interfered with my antidepressants. As for hurting myself, the thought had never crossed my mind. Combat had taught me the value of life, not the pointlessness of it. She said you've been putting on a brave face for me, pretending to be better than you are because you don't want to lose me. She thinks our relationship is actually preventing you from facing your problems. The manipulation had been masterful. Miranda had taken my genuine struggles with PTSD and twisted them into something dark and dangerous, painting me as unstable and deceptive. She'd convinced Marcus that staying with me would be enabling self-destruction, that leaving me would actually be an act of compassion. Marcus, none of that is true. I've never said anything like that to Miranda. But the doubt was already in his eyes. She seemed really worried, Sarah. She cried when she told me about finding you passed out with an empty bottle of pills next to your bed. That had never happened. I'd realized in that moment that Miranda hadn't just lied to Marcus. She'd created an elaborate fictional narrative about my mental health, complete with specific incidents and emotional details designed to convince him I was in crisis. She's lying, I'd said simply. Marcus had looked uncomfortable, clearly caught between loyalty to me and what he believed was concern for my well-being. Why would she lie about something like that? It was a fair question, and one I couldn't answer at the time. I hadn't yet understood that Miranda viewed my happiness as a personal threat, that my recovery and growth triggered something competitive and destructive in her nature. The breakup had sent me spiraling, not because I couldn't live without Marcus, but because I couldn't understand how my own sister could sabotage my healing process so cruelly. The betrayal had cut deeper than any combat wound, leaving me questioning my ability to trust my own judgment about people. It had taken 2 years of therapy and careful observation to recognize the pattern. Miranda didn't just want to be better than me. She needed me to be worse than her. My success made her feel diminished, so she worked systematically to undermine it. When I thrived, she created chaos. When I found happiness, she manufactured crisis. The pattern had repeated throughout my 30s. When I'd started my nursing practice, Miranda had spread rumors about my anger issues stemming from military service, suggesting that I might not be stable enough to work with vulnerable patients. When I'd bought my first house, she'd convinced our parents that I was overextending myself financially and needed an intervention about responsible money management. Each time, she'd wrapped her sabotage in concern, presenting herself as the worried sister trying to protect me from my own poor judgment. And each time, I'd been too focused on defending myself to see the larger strategy at work. But David had changed everything. For the first time since Marcus, I'd found someone who saw past my history to the person I'd become. David didn't try to fix me or save me. He simply loved me, PTSD symptoms and all. He'd helped me understand that healing wasn't about becoming the person I'd been before deployment. It was about integrating all my experiences into someone stronger and more complete. Miranda had recognized the threat immediately. David didn't just make me happy, he made me confident, secure in ways that would be much harder for her to undermine. So she'd escalated her tactics, moving from passive sabotage to active warfare. The July visit had been reconnaissance. She'd been gathering intelligence about our relationship, looking for vulnerabilities she could exploit. When she couldn't find any real problems, she'd decided to manufacture them. But Miranda had made a crucial error in strategy. She'd revealed her plans to someone else, creating evidence of her intent to fabricate the affair and pregnancy. The person on the phone had clearly been uncomfortable with the scheme, questioning whether it was necessary, whether it might backfire. Their reluctance had forced Miranda to be explicit about her motives and methods. "I know it seems extreme," she'd said during one recorded conversation, "but you don't understand how insufferable Sarah's become since she got engaged. She acts like she's finally won something, like she's proved she's worthy of love despite everything that's wrong with her." The bitterness in her voice had been shocking even to me. "She keeps talking about the wedding like it's some kind of validation, like marrying David proves she's overcome her damage. It makes me sick. Someone needs to remind her that broken people don't get fairy tale endings." The person on the other end had pointed out that I seemed genuinely happy, that David appeared to adore me, that maybe Miranda should just let me enjoy my wedding. Happy? Miranda had laughed coldly. She's delusional. She thinks because one man is willing to settle for her, she's somehow healed and whole. But David's just being nice. He feels sorry for her. Once the novelty wears off, once he realizes what he's really signed up for, he'll start looking for an exit strategy. But what if he doesn't? What if they're actually good together? Then I'll give him a reason to leave. I'll show him what he's really married to, a broken woman who can't even trust her own family. That recording had been the most damning of all, because it revealed Miranda's true motivation. This wasn't about protecting David from making a mistake or saving me from heartbreak. This was about proving that I didn't deserve happiness, that my attempts to build a normal life were fundamentally flawed. Miranda couldn't stand the possibility that I might actually succeed at marriage, that I might prove that trauma. Survivors could heal and thrive and find love. My happiness challenged her narrative about my limitations, and she was willing to destroy my wedding to preserve that narrative. But she'd underestimated how much I'd learned about psychological warfare from our years of conflict. She'd taught me to document everything, to look for patterns, to prepare for attacks I hoped would never come. Now, sitting at my reception dinner while Miranda chatted animatedly with David's grandmother, I felt the weight of 3 months' worth of recorded evidence in my bouquet. Every lie she'd rehearsed, every strategy she'd discussed, every moment of malicious intent was preserved and ready to be deployed. Miranda thought she was about to deliver the surprise attack of the century. What she didn't know was that I'd been ready for this battle since July, and I'd been gathering ammunition ever since. The only question left was whether she'd have the courage to follow through with her plan, or whether she'd lose her nerve when the moment came. Knowing Miranda, I was betting on the former. She'd never back down from a fight, especially one she thought she was guaranteed to win. Dinner was served at 7:30 sharp, a perfectly orchestrated affair of herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, and conversations that flowed like wine between tables. I picked at my food, hyper-aware of every movement Miranda made across the reception hall. She was holding court at table 7, regaling David's college friends with stories about our childhood that painted her as the protective older sister who'd always looked out for me. The performance was flawless. She spoke with just the right mix of affection and concern, occasionally glancing my way with a smile that looked loving from a distance. To anyone watching, she was the picture of devoted sisterhood, which would make her eventual betrayal all the more shocking. David leaned over during the salad course. "You're not eating." Nervous about my speech, I lied smoothly. As the bride, I'd be expected to thank our guests before the official toasts began. "You'll be perfect. You always are when it matters." His confidence in me was absolute, unshakable. It was one of the things I loved most about David, his ability to see my strength even when I couldn't see it myself. Tonight, I'd need every ounce of that strength. At 8:15, the wedding coordinator began clearing dessert plates and setting up the microphone system. Miranda excused herself from her table and disappeared toward the ladies' room, probably for final preparations. Touch up her makeup, rehearse her lines one last time, steel herself for what she believed would be the performance of her lifetime. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app, making sure I had enough storage space for what was coming. The device in my bouquet had been recording all day, but I wanted backup documentation of whatever happened next. "Ladies and gentlemen," the coordinator announced, "we're ready to begin our toasts. First, I'd like to invite the best man, Tony Richardson, to say a few words." Tony stood up with characteristic good humor, straightening his tie and tapping the microphone. "Testing, testing. Okay, great. So, I've known David Morrison for 8 years, ever since he showed up at my construction site claiming he knew how to operate a crane." Laughter rippled through the room. Tony launched into a story about David's early days as a contractor, his determination to prove himself despite having no formal training, his refusal to give up even when projects went sideways. But the real change in David came 3 years ago, when he met Sarah. Suddenly, this guy who lived on takeout and energy drinks was cooking real meals. This guy who worked 7 days a week started taking weekends off. This guy who'd never talked about the future suddenly had plans. Tony's voice grew more serious. I watched my best friend become the man he was always meant to be, because he found someone who saw that potential and loved him enough to help him reach it. Sarah, you didn't. Just marry David tonight. You saved him. And David, you better spend the rest of your life proving you're worthy of that gift. The applause was thunderous. David wiped his eyes, and I felt my own throat tighten with emotion. This was what love looked like. Honest, grateful, transformative. Now, Tony continued, I'd like to invite Sarah's sister Miranda to share some words about the bride. Miranda stood gracefully, smoothing her emerald dress and walking to the microphone with the poise of someone completely comfortable being the center of attention. She looked radiant, confident, every inch the devoted sister, honored to speak about her sibling's special day. Thank you, Tony. And thank you all for being here to celebrate Sarah and David tonight. Her voice carried perfectly through the sound system, warm and melodious. I've been thinking all day about what I wanted to say about my sister, about this man she's chosen to spend her life with, about what this moment means for our family. She paused, her eyes scanning the room before landing on mine. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. Sarah has always been complicated. Growing up, she was the responsible one, the overachiever, the one who always tried to do everything perfectly. When she joined the army, I was so proud of her service, but so worried about what it might cost her. Murmurs of agreement from the audience. This was exactly the setup I'd expected. Establish sympathy for my struggles to make the eventual betrayal more believable. When she came home from deployment, she was changed, wounded in ways that weren't always visible. As her sister, I watched her struggle to find her place in the civilian world, to trust people again, to believe she deserved happiness. Miranda's voice caught slightly, as if overcome with emotion. There were times I worried she might never heal completely, that the trauma would always define her relationships. David's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. He thought this was leading somewhere positive, a story about my recovery and growth. He had no idea what was coming. But then David came into her life and I saw something I'd never seen before. Hope. Real, genuine hope that she could build something lasting with someone who understood her. Miranda paused again, and I felt the entire room holding its breath. This was the moment, the pivot from loving sister to devastating truth-teller. Which is why what I have to share tonight is so difficult. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Guests leaned forward, sensing drama. David's grip on my hand tightened. 3 weeks ago, David came to see me. He was conflicted, torn up about his feelings, and he needed someone to talk to. Gasps echoed through the reception hall. At the head table, David's face went white with shock and confusion. He told me that while he cares deeply for Sarah, he's been having doubts about the marriage. He said he felt trapped, like he was settling for safety instead of following his heart. That's not... David started to stand, but I pulled him back down. Wait, I whispered. Let her finish. Miranda's voice grew stronger, more confident. She was hitting her stride now, delivering the performance she'd been rehearsing for months. David told me he's always been attracted to younger women, women who could give him the family he really wants. And then... She paused, placing a protective hand over her stomach. Then he told me he'd made a terrible mistake. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Several guests gasped audibly. At table 7, David's college friends stared in, stunned disbelief. "I'm pregnant," Miranda announced, her voice carrying clearly over the chaos. David and I have been having an affair for the past 6 months. I'm carrying his child." The silence that followed was deafening. David shot to his feet, his face a mask of horror and rage that is completely— I stood calmly, my hand on his arm. "David, sit down." "Sarah, you can't possibly believe— I don't. Sit down," Miranda continued, tears streaming down her face in what looked like genuine anguish. "I never meant for it to happen. I tried to stay away, but David kept pursuing me. He said he needed someone who could understand him in ways that Sarah never could." The lies flowed like water, each one more elaborate than the last. She described fictional rendezvous, imaginary conversations, a completely fabricated relationship that painted David as a cheating manipulator and me as a naive victim. But as she spoke, I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue's sound system. The wedding coordinator looked confused, but I nodded reassuringly. "Miranda," I said, my voice cutting through her dramatic monologue, "that's a fascinating story." She faltered slightly, surprised by my calm tone. "Sarah, I know this is devastating." "Oh, it is, but not for the reasons you think." I tapped my phone screen, and Miranda's recorded voice filled the reception hall. "I'm going to announce that I'm pregnant, that David and I had an affair, and that I'm carrying his baby." Can you imagine the look on Sarah's face? The blood drained from Miranda's face as her own words played back to her. The recording continued, crystal clear and damning. The beauty of it is that by the time anyone figures out I'm lying, the damage will be done. Her marriage will be ruined, her reputation destroyed, and everyone will remember her wedding as the day her sister had to tell the truth about what her husband really wanted. Chaos erupted. Guests began shouting questions, demanding explanations. Miranda grabbed for the microphone, but I was faster. "That recording was made in July," I announced, my voice steady and clear. "3 months ago, my sister began planning to destroy my wedding with fabricated claims of an affair and a fake pregnancy. Every word she just spoke was a lie, carefully rehearsed and designed to cause maximum humiliation. I played another clip, this one of Miranda discussing her motivations. She thinks because one man is willing to settle for her, she's somehow healed and whole. Someone needs to remind her that broken people don't get fairy tale endings. The room had gone deadly quiet. Miranda stood frozen at the microphone, her face cycling through shock, rage, and something that might have been fear. "Miranda," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "You forgot one very important thing. I spent 4 years in military intelligence. I know how to gather evidence." I looked out at our guests, at the faces of people who'd come to celebrate love, and witness instead its attempted destruction. "I have 3 months of recordings. Every conversation where my sister planned this attack, every lie she rehearsed, every moment where she revealed her true intent to fabricate an affair for the sole purpose of destroying my marriage." David stood beside me, his arm around my waist. "I have never spoken to Miranda about our relationship. I have never expressed doubts about marrying Sarah. I have certainly never had an affair with her or anyone else." Miranda's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just— This isn't how it was supposed— How it was supposed to go?" I stepped away from the head table, walking slowly toward the microphone. "You were supposed to destroy my wedding, humiliate me in front of everyone I care about, and prove that I don't deserve happiness. Is that about right?" She backed away from me, shaking her head. "You're twisting everything. I was trying to protect you." "From what? From marrying a man who loves me? From building a life with someone who sees my worth?" The reception hall was so quiet I could hear the sound of my heels on the hardwood floor. When I reached the microphone, I turned to face our guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the drama. This isn't how we planned to end our wedding reception. but I want you all to know that David and I are stronger than any lie someone can tell about us. Love built on truth doesn't crumble when faced with fiction. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. Our friends and family rose to their feet, showing their support not just for our marriage, but for our refusal to let malice win. Miranda fled toward the exit, but not before I heard her final words. "This isn't over, Sarah." I looked at David, my husband of 6 hours, and smiled. "Yes, it is." The rest of the evening was a celebration of everything marriage should be: love, support, and the knowledge that some bonds are strong enough to weather any storm. We danced until midnight, surrounded by people who'd witnessed an attempt to destroy love and chosen to defend it instead. Miranda never apologized, never acknowledged the damage she'd tried to cause. She simply disappeared from our lives, leaving behind only the recordings that proved what she was capable of when threatened by someone else's happiness. But those recordings also proved something else: that truth, carefully documented and patiently preserved, will always triumph over lies. That sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting fire with fire, it's letting someone's own words condemn them. If you've ever been targeted by someone who couldn't stand your success, who tried to tear you down when you started building something, beautiful, remember this: document everything, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that you don't deserve the happiness you fought to create. And if this story resonated with you, if you faced similar betrayals or needed a reminder that truth eventually wins, please subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when the people closest to you become your biggest threats. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not with enemies, but with family members who can't celebrate your victories.